Hello and welcome to the next video in my series on guided doodling. Today we're going to talk about color and introduce a little bit of shading. And if you're ready, I will meet you down in my studio in just a minute.
What you're going to need to follow along today is a piece of paper with some lines drawn on it. If you followed along with the first video in this series, then you'll likely have something that looks like this. If you don't, then I would recommend that you watch that video to create a page that's been divided up into some different shapes. So for today, you'll also need some sort of art supplies that will let you add color to your page. So I'm going to be working with pencil crayons. I may also use some markers and possibly some cheap, inexpensive children's watercolor paints. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my page and think about, is there any space on this page that's speaking to me? Do I see any interesting shapes that I'd like to highlight and emphasize? A little bit earlier this week, I was making some random marks on a page and out popped this little creature. I don't know where it came from, but there it was, and all I had to do was add some facial features and color it in. Another example is a friend of mine was doing this doodling exercise, and she saw a bird, and she decided that she would color in the area around the bird and leave the bird white to give some emphasis. So I'm looking at my page here, and I'm not really seeing anything particular that I want to emphasize.
I just started adding color sort of fairly randomly, not just to one shape. I'm adding color to over a few different shapes, and what I'm doing here is I'm seeing if I can blend these two colors together where I overlap them. Does it create a different sort of effect? So it's looking like a bit like a foot to me. And what I've noticed, interestingly enough, and I had not really thought about that before, the lines on my page before were in blue and purple, and I've continued on using those same colors, and it's one of the principles of art as repetition. I'm going to repeat those colors again over here on this little circle here. I'm going to make one side of the circle blue and the other side purple. So repetition again. I wonder, yeah, maybe I'll make the house, color in the house to emphasize the house. Now, do you notice that the things that I've added color to, they seem to be more prominent than the things that I've not colored in? This circle here, I've kind of ignored it in my coloring, so it becomes less prominent. Adding color can add emphasis, and it also creates connections. So these two areas are connected by the colors, and these two areas are also connected by the colors that I've used. If you use contrasting colors that are quite different next to each other, things tend to stand out. Welcome back. As you can see, there's been some development off screen. A few weeks have passed. I'm adding some green in this area here. I blended some green and yellow together, and I'll put in some orange beside the green. I'll overlap the orange with the green a little bit. If you notice where I overlapped the yellow and the green, the colors stayed quite bright and vibrant, but where I'm overlapping the orange and the green, the color is becoming sort of darker and less intense. And now let's see what happens if I blend the orange and yellow together. And I blend the yellow and the orange together. Things stay quite vibrant. They don't get dull there. And if you're familiar with the color wheel, you might understand what's going on there. The color wheel is just a tool to help us to understand how colors work together. This is color theory, so it's not necessarily color truth, But let's talk about the way this works. So it starts out with 3 primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. And then between those 3 primary colors, you have green, orange, and purple. And theoretically, orange is made from out of the 2 colors on either side of it. Same with green, it's made from the 2 colors on either side, and purple is made from the 2 colors beside it. And those colors are further divided up into what are called warm colors, the kind of colors that you might see in a fire, and cool colors, the kind of types of colors that you might see in ice or in water. And the way the colors work is the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel are called analogous colors. They blend together really easily. And the colors that are across from each other on the color wheel are called complementary colors. And if you mix the colors that are across from each other, you get what some people call mud. But these really are the neutral colors, the colors that allow us to create our shadows. And the shadows are what let us create depth and perspective and the illusion of 3D form in our artwork. So that is a really short introduction to color theory. The other thing that I wanted to do is to show you what happens if I add some watercolor paint. So let's see what happens if I add some purple on top of the orange and the yellow there. So because I'm using watercolor on top of crayons, and the crayons are quite waxy, what will end up happening is that the watercolor will sit between the gaps in the crayons, and you can see that here perhaps. And it creates an interesting effect depending on which colors you choose. And again, this technique helps if you understand the color wheel and the way colors blend together. I'm using a really cheap set of kids' watercolor paints to prove that you can in fact make art with poor tools. You don't need to go out and buy the most expensive equipment that you can find. You can make art with whatever you have around. So there we go. The other thing that I noticed, there's a face, there's a profile of a face right here. So I'm going to take a black marker and sort of create some emphasis. I'm going to highlight this face, this face profile. Can you see that face there? Let's use this square here. And this is looking a little bit like a dice, a single dice would be a die. And now we can shade it. So one surface is going to have the brightest color, and then there's going to be a dark area which is going to be in shadow. So this side is going to be dull and dark, so that's where the shadow is. And then this surface at the bottom, maybe this is where the light's coming this way, so we'll leave it white. So this starts to give you the illusion of depth as well by creating shading, by using colors, darker colors and lighter colors. The brighter colors are where the light is hitting the cube, and the darker colors are in the shadow. By varying the colors, you're giving your viewer some information about which sides are in the light and which sides are in the dark. And I think I'm going to stop now.